Agent Vrothan had been sent to Earth 20 years ago with a single mission: observe humanity, document their weaknesses, send a final report when his analysis was complete. The Drelvar Imperial Intelligence Service had selected him for this mission because of his unique ability. Vrothan was one of only 12 Drelvar in the entire Empire who could pass for human. His species was a rare subspecies of Drelvar that had evolved on a colony world with similar atmospheric conditions to Earth. Their bodies were small and bipedal. Their skin was pale. Their faces could pass for human if the right surgical modifications were made. The Empire had taken Vrothan to a secret medical facility on the eve of his mission. They had altered his face. They had given him a new identity. They had implanted memories of a human childhood. They had sent him to Earth on a refugee transport that nobody questioned. They had embedded him in human society as a man named Thomas Reed. A man who worked in a small bookstore in the city of Portland, in the human nation of the United States. For 20 years, Thomas Reed had lived as a human. He had paid taxes. He had voted in elections. He had bought groceries. He had read books. He had watched the children of his neighbors grow up. He had befriended a woman named Mary, who worked at the cafe across the street from his bookstore. He had attended birthday parties. He had cried at funerals. He had laughed at jokes. He had done all the things that humans did, every day, for 20 years, and the entire time he had been a spy. His mission had been simple: find humanity's weaknesses, document them, send them back to the Empire. When the Empire had enough information, they would launch an invasion that would destroy human civilization. Vrothan's report would be the foundation of that invasion. His 20 years of observation would tell the Empire exactly how to defeat the species that had been growing in this corner of the galaxy. The final report was due tomorrow. Thomas Reed sat in his small apartment above the bookstore. He had closed the shop early. He had told Mary he was not feeling well. She had been concerned. She had offered to bring him soup. He had declined politely. He had said he just needed to sleep. She had nodded and accepted his explanation without question, because that was what humans did when their friends were sick. They accepted explanations. They offered help. They moved on. Mary did not know what Thomas Reed was. Mary did not know that the man she had known for 12 years, the man she had eaten lunch with almost every day, the man whose bookstore she had visited 1,000 times, was not actually a human at all. He was a Drelvar Imperial agent. He had been studying her and the rest of humanity for 2 decades. He had been preparing to deliver the report that would lead to her death, and the deaths of her family, and the deaths of her entire species. Thomas Reed sat at his small kitchen table. He had a glass of water in front of him. He had a notebook. He had a pen. In approximately 6 hours, a hidden device in his apartment would activate. The device would establish a quantum communication link with the Drelvar Empire. The link would last for 30 minutes. During that 30 minutes, Thomas Reed would transmit his final report. He would describe everything he had learned about humanity. He would identify the weaknesses. He would recommend the most efficient method of invasion. He would do his duty to his species. And then the link would close, and the Empire would begin their preparations. And within 5 years, Earth would be conquered. Humans would be subjugated. The small blue planet that Thomas Reed had called home for 20 years would become another world in the Drelvar Empire. Mary would either be killed or enslaved. Her children would grow up as servants of an alien power, or they would not grow up at all. This was his mission. This was his duty. This was what he had been sent to do. Thomas Reed picked up the pen. He stared at the notebook. He had been preparing his report for years. He had a detailed outline. He had data. He had observations. He had recommendations. All he had to do was write it out in the proper format and transmit it. 6 hours of writing. Then 30 minutes of transmission. Then he would board a hidden craft that the Empire had positioned in the Pacific Ocean, and he would leave Earth, and he would return home to his real species, and he would be honored for his service. He set the pen down. He picked up the glass of water. He drank slowly. He set the glass down. He picked up the pen again. He did not write anything. He sat in the kitchen for a long time. He could hear the city outside, cars passing in the street below, a dog barking somewhere down the block, someone laughing as they walked past on the sidewalk. The sounds of a human city, at night, going about its ordinary business. He thought about Mary. He had met Mary 12 years ago, when she had first taken the job at the cafe across the street. She had been 34 at the time. She had been freshly divorced. She had been quietly devastated by the end of her marriage, though she had hidden it well. He had been her customer first, ordering coffee in the mornings before he opened his bookstore. Then they had started talking. Then she had started visiting his bookstore on her breaks. Then they had started having lunch together. Then they had become friends. She had never become anything more than a friend. Thomas Reed had been very careful about that. The Empire's instructions had been specific. He was not to form deep attachments to humans. He was not to engage in romantic relationships. He was not to compromise his mission. He had followed these instructions. He and Mary had remained friends, only friends, for 12 years. Sometimes he had wondered if she had wanted more. Sometimes he had wondered if he had wanted more. He had set those wonderings aside. He had remembered his mission, but friendship had not been forbidden. The Empire had been clear that some level of social integration was necessary for cover. Friendships were acceptable, as long as they were not allowed to become attachments. And Thomas Reed had thought, for many years, that he had successfully maintained the line between friendship and attachment. He had believed that Mary was simply a useful element of his cover, a convenient social connection that helped him appear normal. He had been lying to himself. Simple. Mary had become his attachment in spite of all his careful precautions. She had become the person he thought of in the morning when he woke up. She had become the person whose laughter he listened for in the cafe across the street. She had become the person whose problems he worried about. She had become his friend, his best friend, his only real friend on this entire planet. And the Empire's preparations to invade Earth would mean her death, either directly, in the invasion, or indirectly, as one of the countless humans who would die during the years of conquest. Thomas Reed could not write the report. Not yet. He needed to think. He stood up from the kitchen table. He walked to the window. He looked out at the city. Portland was a small city by galactic standards, but it was big enough to contain about 600,000 humans, all of them going about their lives, all of them oblivious to the fact that an alien spy was about to send a report that would end their world. He had not chosen this assignment. The Empire had chosen it for him. He had been told that he had a duty. He had been told that humanity was a threat. He had been told that the Empire needed his help to neutralize that threat before humans could become powerful enough to challenge Drelvar dominance in the galaxy. He had believed all of this when he had arrived 20 years ago. The Empire's briefings had been thorough. They had shown him recording of humans fighting wars among themselves. They had shown him the weapons humans had built. They had shown him the destruction humans were capable of inflicting on each other. They had told him that any species capable of such cruelty to its own kind would be far more cruel to other species when humans eventually reached the stars in sufficient numbers. The argument had made sense. The Empire's logic had been compelling. Vrothan, the young Drelvar agent who had become Thomas Reed, had accepted his mission with conviction. He had believed he was protecting his own people from a future threat, but 20 years of living among humans had changed him. He had not expected this. The Empire had not expected this. They had assumed he would remain a Drelvar in his heart, regardless of how long he lived among humans. They had assumed his loyalty would not waver. They had assumed his observations would confirm their fears about human cruelty. His observations had not confirmed their fears. His observations had revealed something much more complicated. Humans were capable of cruelty. That was true. He had seen humans hurt each other in many ways during his 20 years on Earth. He had watched a husband leave his wife. He had watched a child be bullied at school. He had watched a customer at the cafe scream at a waitress about a wrong order. He had watched humans commit small acts of meanness every day against each other. He had documented all of this. But humans were also capable of kindness. He had seen this too. He had watched Mary stay late at the cafe to help an elderly customer who could not afford her meal. He had watched neighbors bring food to a family whose grandmother had just died. He had watched strangers help each other carry groceries up the stairs. He had watched a child give half of his sandwich to a homeless man without being asked. He had watched humans, every day, perform small acts of grace against the indifference of the universe. He had also documented these things, though the Empire had not asked for them. The Empire's model of humanity had been a model of weakness and cruelty. Vrothan's 20 years of observation had shown him a different picture. Humans were not weak or cruel. They were complicated. They were capable of being both worse and better than the Empire had anticipated. And the Empire's invasion plans, based on the assumption that humans would crumble under pressure, were going to fail. Not because humans were stronger than the Empire thought, but because the Empire had fundamentally misunderstood what humans were. But there was another problem, a bigger one. A problem that Vrothan had only begun to understand in the past few years. The Empire's invasion plans assumed that humans were technologically inferior to the Drelvar. This had been true 20 years ago when Vrothan had arrived. It was not true anymore. He had documented this too, carefully, quietly, without anyone in the Empire being aware of what he was actually observing. The Empire had thought he was simply gathering social and biological data. They had not thought to ask him about technological progress. They had assumed they could track human technology from a distance through their long-range observations of human space colonies and ships. The Empire had been wrong about this. They had been very wrong. Humans had been making technological progress at a rate that should not be possible. Their fusion drives had improved fivefold in the past decade. Their weapons technology had advanced by similar margins. Their computing capabilities had exceeded what Drelvar scientists believed was the theoretical maximum for a species of humanity's age. Their materials science had developed alloys that the Empire had not even begun to research. Most concerning of all, humans had developed weapons that the Empire did not know they had. Vrothan had learned about these by careful infiltration of human academic networks, by reading research papers that were buried in obscure journals, by attending public lectures that were technically open to anyone. Humans had developed kinetic weapons that could destroy capital ships from extreme range. They had developed shield technologies that could absorb energy weapons without weakening. They had developed propulsion systems that could move large fleets across light years in days instead of weeks. If the Empire invaded with their current plans, the Empire would lose. Vrothan was certain of this. He had run the calculations 100 times in the past year. The Empire's invasion fleet would arrive at Earth and discover that human defensive technology was at least equal to Imperial offensive technology. The battle would be brutal. The Empire would lose at least 60% of its fleet, possibly more, possibly all of it. And after the Empire lost, what would happen? Humans would know about the Drelvar. Humans would know that an empire had tried to invade them. Humans would know that they were not safe in the galaxy. They would, almost certainly, respond. They would build a fleet of their own. They would cross the stars. They would find the Empire's homeworlds. And then, with their superior technology and their fierce determination to protect their own kind, they would do to the Empire what the Empire had planned to do to them. The Empire's invasion would not just fail. It would lead to the destruction of the Empire itself. Vrothan had been trying to figure out how to communicate this to the Empire for the past several years. The problem was that his standard communications were monitored. Anything he sent that contradicted the Empire's preferred narrative would be flagged for review. The agents who reviewed his reports would assume he had been compromised. They would order his extraction and replace him with a different agent. The new agent would not have his 20 years of experience. The new agent would not understand what was actually happening on Earth. The new agent would tell the Empire what they wanted to hear, so Vrothan had waited. He had waited for the final report, the only report that would be sent through the secure quantum link, the only report that the senior leadership of the Empire would actually read. The final report would be his only chance to tell the truth. But now that the moment had come, he could not bring himself to write it, because writing it meant betraying everything he had been raised to believe. It meant betraying the Empire that had selected him for this mission. Meant betraying the version of himself that arrived on Earth 20 years ago, full of certainty about duty and peace and the rightness of the imperial cause. He sat at the window for a long time. He watched the lights of the city. He watched the cars passing below. He thought about everything he had seen in 20 years, the good and the bad, the cruelty and the kindness, the petty meanness and the profound grace. He thought about Mary. He went back to the kitchen table. He picked up the pen. He began to write. He did not write the report the Empire wanted. He wrote a different report. The report he had been preparing in his mind for years. The report he had been afraid to commit to paper. The report that would, in the next few hours, change the fate of 2 civilizations. He wrote for 3 hours. He filled the notebook with his observations. The real observations, not the ones the Empire wanted. He wrote about human kindness. He wrote about human creativity. He wrote about human technology. He wrote about the impossibility of invading Earth successfully with current imperial forces. He wrote about the certainty that any invasion attempt would result in the destruction of the Empire itself. And then he wrote his recommendation. The recommendation that would seal his fate. He recommended that the Empire abandon its invasion plans. He recommended that the Empire instead initiate peaceful first contact with humanity. He recommended that the Empire treat humans as potential allies rather than as future enemies. He recommended that the Empire reveal the existence of the Drelvar to humans openly and offer cooperation, trade, and mutual defense. He knew exactly what the Empire would do with this report. They would not accept his due with this report. They would not accept, they would assume he had been compromised. They would send agents to terminate him. They would replace him with someone else and continue with their invasion plans, but he had thought of this. He had a plan. He finished writing at 3 in the morning. He set down the pen. He looked at the notebook. He had filled 40 pages with his observations and his recommendations. It was the most honest thing he had ever written. It was the most dangerous thing he had ever done. He sat back in his chair. He drank the last of his water. He breathed slowly. He waited for the activation of the quantum communication device. At 3:47 in the morning, the device hidden inside his apartment wall activated. A small green light appeared in his ceiling, indicating that the link was open. Vrothan opened the recording function. He began to read his report aloud, slowly, carefully, in standard Drelvar. He read for 20 minutes. He read everything he had written. He did not skip any of it. He did not edit anything. He gave the Empire the complete truth. When he finished reading the report, he paused. The green light was still active. He had 10 more minutes on the quantum link. He had planned for this. He had one more thing to say. This is Agent Vrothan, also known as Thomas Reed, ending my final report to the Empire. I have served the Drelvar Empire for 27 years, 7 years of training, 20 years of field operations on Earth. I have always served with loyalty. I have always served with the best interests of my people in mind. It is because of my loyalty to my people that I cannot continue this mission. The invasion of Earth would result in the destruction of the Drelvar Empire. I cannot, in good conscience, provide the Empire with information that will lead to its own destruction. I have provided you instead with the truth. The truth that humans are not what we believed them to be. The truth that they are technologically advanced beyond what we have understood. The truth that they are kind in ways that we did not anticipate, and dangerous in ways that we did not understand. I will not be returning to Drelvar space. I have made my decision. I am staying on Earth. I will continue to live as Thomas Reed in the small bookstore in Portland, with my friend Mary, who does not know what I am. I will not reveal my origins to her. I will not reveal my origins to anyone. I will simply continue to live among the humans as one of them until my natural lifespan ends. If the Empire chooses to send agents to terminate me, I will not resist. I will accept whatever consequences my decision brings. I will not run. I will not hide. I will be in the bookstore tomorrow morning. If your agents wish to find me, that is where I will be. But before you decide, I ask you to consider one thing. I ask you to consider that I have lived among humans for 20 years. I have observed them more closely than any other Drelvar in history. I know them better than any of you. And I am telling you, with all the authority of my experience, that the invasion will fail. The Empire will be destroyed. Your families will die. Your worlds will burn. Not because humans are evil. Because humans, when threatened, defend themselves with a ferocity that no other species in the galaxy can match. They have been defending themselves against each other for 10,000 years. They have become very good at it. Do not test them, please. Do not test them. I am begging you. I am begging you not to test them. This is Agent Vrothan, ending my final transmission. I have served the Empire as best I could. I hope my final service is to save you from yourselves. He shut off the recording. The green light on the ceiling pulsed 3 times. The transmission was complete. The link closed. The device deactivated. Vrothan sat alone in his kitchen, the notebook in front of him, the city quiet outside his window in the very early morning hours. He had done it. He had betrayed his empire. He had told them the truth they did not want to hear. He had refused to come home. He had committed an act of profound disloyalty for the sake of a higher loyalty. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if the Empire would listen to him. He did not know if assassins would be on the next ship to Earth. He did not know if he would be alive in a week. But he had done what he could. He had used his final report to try to save both his people and the humans he had come to love. The rest was no longer in his hands. He went to bed. He did not sleep well. He kept waiting for something to happen, some sign that the Empire had received his message, some response. There was nothing. The night passed quietly. The morning came. He got up. He took a shower. He dressed. He went downstairs to open the bookstore. Mary was already at the cafe across the street. She waved at him through the window. He waved back. She mouthed, "Feeling better?" at him. He nodded and smiled. The day passed normally. Customers came into the bookstore. He sold books. He talked to people. He helped a teenager find a novel for a school report. He recommended a cookbook to a young mother. He chatted with regulars about the weather. He had lunch with Mary, as he always did on Tuesdays. They talked about her plans for her vacation next month. They laughed about a movie they had both seen recently. She did not know that he had been an alien spy. She did not know that he had betrayed his empire the night before. She did not know that his life might end at any moment. She simply enjoyed her lunch with her friend. He did not tell her any of it. He had decided that he would never tell her. She did not need to know. The knowledge would only burden her. Better that she remember him, if he died, as the kind bookstore owner she had been friends with for 12 years. Better that her memory of him remained simple and clean. 3 days passed. Nothing happened. He began to wonder if the Empire had received his message at all. Perhaps the quantum link had failed. Perhaps his report had not been transmitted. Perhaps no one in Drelvar space knew what he had done. On the 4th day, a man walked into the bookstore. He was an older man, distinguished looking. He wore an expensive suit. He had silver hair and clear blue eyes. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who was used to being important. He was a human. Vrothan could tell instantly. His DNA, his biometrics, his micro-expressions, all of them were human. But there was something else about him, something that made Vrothan's training scream warnings. The man walked up to the counter where Vrothan was working. He smiled politely. "Hello," the man said. "Are you the owner of this fine establishment?" "I am, sir. My name is Thomas Reed. How can I help you?" The man's smile widened slightly. "Mr. Reed, or perhaps I should call you Agent Vrothan." Vrothan's hand moved before he could consciously decide to do so. It moved toward the hidden weapon under the counter, the weapon he had kept there for 20 years in case of emergency. But the man's hand was already on his wrist, gentle, firm, not hostile exactly, but not allowing the movement either. "Please, Agent Vrothan, I am not here to harm you. I am here to talk. May we have a conversation?" Vrothan looked at the man. His training was telling him to fight, to escape, to do anything except sit and have a conversation with someone who knew his real identity. But 20 years of living as Thomas Reed had taught him to override his training. He had learned to be calm. He had learned to assess situations carefully. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "My name is Director Sarah Chen. I am the head of Earth's intelligence service. We have been watching you for some time, Agent Vrothan. We have known about you for 19 of your 20 years on Earth." Vrothan felt the blood drain from his face. 19 years? "Yes. We identified you approximately 1 year after you arrived. We did not approach you because we wanted to study your behavior. We wanted to understand what your empire was learning from your observations. We wanted to know what you were going to recommend. How did you find me so quickly?" Director Chen's smiled. It was a small, tired smile. "Agent Vrothan, Earth has been preparing for first contact with hostile alien species for over a century. We knew that eventually someone would try to infiltrate us. We had built detection systems decades before your arrival. When the Drelvar refugee transport arrived with you on board, we identified you within months. You let me operate for 19 years anyway, W. Yes, we let you operate. We watched you. We studied you. We learned everything we could about Drelvar capabilities and intentions through your activities. You were, ironically, our most valuable source of intelligence about the empire that was studying us." Vrothan sat down on the stool behind the counter. He felt suddenly very tired. "And the technological advances I observed, the ones I documented in my report, those were real, Agent Vrothan, but they were not the entire picture. We have technology we did not let you see. We have weapons we did not let you observe. We have fleet capabilities that even our most careful agents have kept hidden. The Empire's situation is worse than you described in your report. If the Empire invades, they will not lose 60% of their fleet. They will lose all of it. Within the first hour, Daba by the ancestors. Yes, So your decision last night was the correct one. Your decision to defy the Empire was the most important act of loyalty you could have performed for your people. We have been monitoring your transmission while I listened to your entire report. We were impressed, and we were grateful. You listened to my transmission? Of course. We have been monitoring all Drelvar Imperial communications for the past 15 years. We have full access to your communication networks. We have known about every invasion plan, every fleet movement, every strategic decision. The Empire has no secrets from us, Agent Vrothan. They have not had secrets for a long time. Vrothan stared at her. The full scope of what she was telling him was beginning to sink in. The Empire was not just outmatched technologically. They were outmatched in every possible way. Earth had been studying them for years. Earth had been preparing for any conflict. Earth had been ready, the whole time, for a war that the Empire was completely unprepared for. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now, Agent Vrothan, you have a choice. The Empire will likely send agents to terminate you. Your transmission has been received. They will not believe your report. They will assume you have been compromised. They will send assassins. I expected this. We can protect you, Agent Vrothan. We can provide you with new identification, a new location, new security measures. We can keep you safe. We can also use your information and your experience to help us in our preparations for whatever the Empire decides to do next. ... You want me to become a human asset. ... We want to give you a choice. You have spent 20 years living as Thomas Reed. You have built a life here. You have friends. You have a life here. You have a community. You have a bookstore that you love. We want to give you the option to continue that life with our protection, with our support, as one of us, if you wish. Vrothan was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Director Chen. He looked at the bookstore around him. He looked through the window at the cafe across the street, where Mary was working. He thought about his choices. Director Chen, if I accept your offer, if I become an Earth asset, what happens to my own people? What happens to the Drelvar Empire? Director Chen's expression softened slightly. Agent Vrothan, we do not want to destroy your empire. We do not want war. We want peace. The information you have provided us about the Empire's intentions allows us to prepare a different response than military destruction. We are going to make contact with the Empire formally. We are going to reveal that we know about them. We are going to demonstrate our capabilities. We are going to offer them peace with very specific conditions about their future relationship with Earth. What conditions? They will abandon their invasion plans. They will recognize Earth's sovereignty. They will engage in formal diplomatic relations with us. They will pay reparations for any harm caused by their espionage and planning, and they will not ever attempt to harm humans again. And if they refuse, then we will respond. But Agent Vrothan, your report has given them the chance to choose peace. If the Empire's leaders read what you wrote and choose to accept peace instead of continuing their plans, they will save themselves. If they choose to continue their plans, they will be the ones who chose war. Either way, the outcome is in their hands. You have given them the gift of clear knowledge. The decision is theirs. Vrothan thought about this. He thought about his empire. He thought about his people. He thought about the leaders who had sent him to Earth 20 years ago. He thought about whether they would accept the truth he had given them, or whether they would reject it and choose destruction. He did not know. He could not predict what they would do. He only knew that he had done what he could. He had told them the truth. He had given them the chance to choose differently. The rest was beyond his control. Director Chen, I accept your offer. I want to stay here. I want to continue being Thomas Reed. I want to keep my bookstore. I want to keep my friend Mary. I want to live the rest of my life in the place where I have spent the last 20 years. That is acceptable to us, Agent Vrothan. We will arrange security for you. We will protect you from any Drelvar assassins. We will also occasionally ask for your assistance in understanding Drelvar culture and decision-making. Will that be acceptable? Yes, that will be acceptable. Then we have an agreement. Director Chen stood up. She extended her hand to Vrothan. He looked at her hand for a moment. He had observed this human gesture many times. The handshake, a symbol of agreement and trust. He had never performed it himself except in his Thomas Reed persona, when he had been pretending to be human. He reached out and shook her hand. It was the first time he had done so as himself, not as his cover identity. It felt strange. It also felt right. Welcome to Earth, Agent Vrothan. Thank you, Director Chen. I have been here for 20 years, but I think I am only just arriving now. She smiled. She nodded. She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Agent Vrothan, one more thing. Your friend Mary across the street. Does she know what you are? No. She does not know. I never told her. Are you going to tell her? Vrothan thought about this. I do not know. Maybe. Someday. But not yet. Not now. She would not understand, and she does not need to know. She is happy as she is. That is your decision to make. I will not interfere. She left the bookstore. The bell above the door rang as she opened it and closed it behind her. Vrothan sat alone at his counter for a long time. He thought about everything that had just happened. He thought about his old life as a Drelvar agent. He thought about his new life as a fully accepted resident of Earth. He thought about Mary, sitting in the cafe across the street, completely unaware of how close her world had come to ending. That afternoon, Mary came over for their usual afternoon coffee break. She sat on the stool across from his counter. She drank her coffee. She talked about her day. She told him a funny story about a customer who had ordered the same complicated coffee drink 3 times that morning, each time with a small modification. They laughed together about the customer's persistence. Mary did not notice that Vrothan was looking at her differently today. She did not notice that his eyes were wet with what humans called tears, though Drelvar did not normally produce them. She did not notice that he was, for the first time in 20 years of friendship, completely present with her, not divided between his cover identity and his real mission. He was just Thomas Reed now. He was her friend. He was the owner of the bookstore across from her cafe. He was a man who had made a choice the night before, to be exactly what he had appeared to be for 12 years of their friendship. He had chosen to become real. He had chosen Mary over his empire. He had chosen humanity over duty. She did not need to know any of this. He would not tell her. He would simply continue to be her friend. He would continue to drink coffee with her on her breaks. He would continue to have lunch with her on Tuesdays. He would continue to recommend books to her customers. He would continue to live the life he had been pretending to live, except that now he was not pretending anymore. In the weeks that followed, the Empire made its decision. They received Vrothan's report. They held emergency sessions. They debated. They argued. They threatened. Some of the senior leaders wanted to dismiss his report and proceed with the invasion. Others wanted to consider his warnings seriously. What ultimately decided the matter was Earth's formal communication. Director Chen had not waited for the Empire to act first. She had sent her own message to the Empire 2 weeks after Vrothan accepted his asylum. The message had been clear. We know about your invasion plans. We have known for years. We have decoded your communications. We know your fleet sizes. We know your weapons. We know your homeworlds. We can defeat you decisively if you attempt to invade us. We do not wish to. We offer you peace on these terms. The terms had been generous, given the circumstances. The Empire had been required to abandon its invasion plans. It had been required to enter formal diplomatic relations with Earth. It had been required to pay symbolic reparations to the families of the 8 humans the Empire had killed over the past 2 centuries during reconnaissance operations. That was all. No occupation, no subjugation, no dismantling of the Empire. Just peace. The Empire had accepted the terms. They had no choice. Earth had demonstrated, in the months that followed, exactly how outmatched the Empire was. Earth had shown the Empire's leaders satellite images of Imperial homeworlds taken from Earth fleet positions that the Empire had not been able to detect. Earth had revealed the locations of every Imperial fleet, including ships that the Empire had thought were completely hidden. Earth had made it clear, in 1,000 small ways, that the Empire had been operating under massive misunderstandings about their own security. Peace was signed. Formal diplomatic relations began. Drelvar embassies were established on Earth. Human embassies were established on Drelvar homeworlds. Trade began. Cultural exchanges began. The 2 species, which had been on the edge of war, instead began to learn how to be peaceful neighbors. Vrothan watched all of this from his bookstore in Portland. He continued to live his quiet life. He continued to sell books. He continued to drink coffee with Mary. He continued to be the Thomas Reed he had pretended to be for so many years. Sometimes, in the evenings, he would sit alone in his apartment above the bookstore and think about his life. He would think about his original mission. He would think about the Empire that had sent him. He would think about the colleagues he had left behind, the family he would never see leapt again, the species he had betrayed for the sake of a different loyalty. He would feel guilt sometimes. He would feel grief sometimes. He would feel uncertainty about whether he had made the right choice. But then he would look out the window. He would see the cafe across the street, where Mary was still working some evenings. He would see the city around him, humans walking and laughing and living their ordinary lives. He would see Earth, the small blue planet that he had been sent to destroy, the small blue planet he had chosen to save instead. And he would know that he had made the right choice, even if it had cost him his species, even if it had cost him his identity, even if it had cost him everything he had been raised to believe in. He had made the right choice. He had saved more than he had betrayed. 20 more years passed. Vrothan, still living as Thomas Reed, grew old by human standards. He had been instructed in the human ways of aging by the Earth Intelligence Service. He had taken medication to make his appearance match what a human of his age would look like. He had developed gray hair. He had developed wrinkles. He had developed the small physical signs of an aging human body, even though his Drelvar physiology was, in actuality, only middle-aged by his species standards. Mary had also aged. She had retired from the cafe. She had moved to a small house outside the city. She had grandchildren now from her son's marriage. She visited Vrothan in the bookstore every few weeks when she came into the city for errands. They still had lunch together. They still talked about everything. They still laughed. She had still never known what he was. On a quiet afternoon in late autumn, Mary came into the bookstore. She was 74 years old. Vrothan, in his apparent age, was 73. They sat together on the stools behind the counter, drinking coffee that Mary had brought from the cafe she had retired from. The new owner had kept her favorite blend in stock, specifically because she still came in for it. "Thomas," Mary said. "Yes, Mary, I need to tell you something. I have known for a long time. I have been waiting for the right moment. I think this is it." Vrothan looked at her. "Tell me what?" Mary was quiet for a moment. She set down her coffee cup. She looked at him directly. "Thomas, you have been my best friend for 32 years. We have known each other since I was 34 years old. We have eaten more meals together than I have eaten with anyone else, including my own children. I love you. I have always loved you. Did you know that?" Vrothan felt his throat tighten. He had not expected this. "Mary, hold on. Let me finish. I love you, Thomas. I have always loved you. I never said anything, because you seemed not to want that kind of relationship. You always kept a certain distance. You were affectionate, but never quite romantic. I assumed you preferred friendship to romance, at least with me, so I respected that. I have been your friend for 32 years. Not your lover, not your spouse, just your friend, because that is what you seem to want, Mary. And, Thomas, I have known for a long time that you were not telling me everything about yourself. I do not know exactly what you have been hiding. I never asked because I respected your right to your secrets. But I have known there were things that did not quite fit. Small things, things that anyone else might have missed, but that I noticed because I paid such close attention to you. I never knew exactly what you were, but I knew you were not exactly what you appeared to be. Vrothan stared at her. He could not speak. I am telling you this now, Thomas, because I am dying. I have cancer. The doctors have given me about 6 months, maybe less. I wanted to tell you the truth before I died. I wanted you to know that I loved you, and that I had always known you were hiding something, and that none of that mattered. I loved the man I knew. I loved the man you let me see. Whatever else you were, whatever you were hiding, it did not matter. The friendship was real. The years were real. The love was real. She paused. She took a breath. That is all I wanted to say. I wanted you to know. Vrothan was crying. Real tears, Drelvar tears, though humans could not tell the difference. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. They sat together in the bookstore, holding hands, two old beings who had been friends for 32 years, one human and one not, both of them at the end of their lives in different ways. Mary. Yes, Thomas. I love you too. I have loved you for almost all the years we have known each other. I just could not say so. There were reasons. They do not matter anymore. I love you. I am glad I waited to tell you. I am glad we had this conversation, Mary. Can I tell you something? About what I have been hiding. She looked at him. Her eyes were tired but kind. Only if you want to. You do not owe me an explanation, Thomas. I have already accepted that you have secrets. I want to tell you. Then tell me. So he told her everything. About being Drelvar. About being a spy. About the Empire's invasion plans. About his decision to betray the Empire and save Earth. About Director Chen and the bargain he had made 40 years ago. About living as Thomas Reed because he had grown to love the life and the world and the woman across the street. He told her everything. He talked for 2 hours. She listened without interrupting. She asked a few questions at the end. He answered them honestly. She nodded slowly. When he finished, she sat in silence for a moment. Then she said something that surprised him. Thomas, I am not surprised. I always knew you were not exactly human. I did not know exactly what you were, but I knew. The way you moved sometimes, the way you reacted to certain things, the slight differences I could not quite identify. I knew. You knew? I knew. And I loved you anyway. I loved you because of what you chose to be, not what you were born as. You chose to be my friend. You chose to be Thomas Reed. You chose Earth. You chose us. Those choices made you who you are. They were the real you. The Drelvar agent who was sent here is gone. He has been gone for 40 years. The man sitting next to me is Thomas Reed. He is my best friend. He is the love of my life. He is the person I have spent more time with than anyone else in this world. Whatever he was before he became Thomas Reed does not matter. Vrothan started crying again. So did Mary. They sat in the bookstore, two old beings, crying together about the years they had spent together and the years they would not get to spend together. About the love they had felt but had not been able to express. About the simple, terrible, beautiful fact of their friendship. Mary died 4 months later. Vrothan was at her side when it happened. He held her hand. He told her he loved her. She told him she loved him too. Then she closed her eyes and was gone. He stayed in the bookstore after she died. He continued to sell books. He continued to live in his apartment above the shop. He continued to be Thomas Reed. He never married. He never told anyone else what he was. He simply lived quietly, doing the work he had come to love, in the city he had come to call home. He died, by human reckoning, 23 years after Mary. He had managed to live to a very old age, for either a human or a Drelvar. He died peacefully in his sleep. His death was reported in the local newspaper, in a small obituary that mentioned his ownership of the beloved bookstore that had been a Portland institution for over 50 years. The obituary did not mention that he was the only Drelvar known to have ever applied for asylum on Earth, or that his betrayal of his empire had prevented an interstellar war and saved millions of lives. He had asked for his real identity to be kept hidden after his death. The Earth Intelligence Service honored his request. Director Sarah Chen had died years before him. Her successor had agreed to maintain the secret. The world would never know what Thomas Reed had done. The world would only know that he had been a kind old man who ran a bookstore in Portland, and who had been very dear to a small community of customers and friends. Some things should be remembered. Some things should be quietly carried forward. Some things should be quietly lost to history, because the lives they affected deserved to be remembered as simple human lives, not as the consequences of intergalactic political decisions. Thomas Reed had wanted to be remembered as a friend, as a bookseller, as Mary's companion, not as Agent Vrothan, not as the spy who had defied his empire, not as the man who had prevented a war. He had wanted to be remembered for what he had chosen, not for what he had been born as. That was the choice. That was the legacy. That was the gift he had given to the world. He had become human, not biologically, not literally, but in every way that mattered, in the way he lived, in the way he loved, in the way he chose to spend his life. He had become human by choosing humans every day for 63 years. That was the deepest secret of the Drelvar agent who had been sent to destroy Earth. He had loved Earth too much to destroy it. He had loved a single human woman too much to leave her. He had loved the small life he had been ordered to observe so much that he had chosen to make it his own. And in doing so, he had taught both his species and humanity an important lesson. The lesson was simple. You do not become what you are born as. You become what you choose. Every day, with every action, with every kindness, with every decision to do the right thing instead of the easy thing, you become the person you choose to be. Agent Vrothan had chosen to be Thomas Reed. He had stayed Thomas Reed until the day he died. He had chosen humanity over his empire. He had chosen love over duty. He had chosen a single small life over the grand strategies of galactic politics. And the galaxy had been better for his choice. The peace between humans and Drelvar had lasted for over a century. The two species had become trusted allies. Their cultures had enriched each other. Their scientists had collaborated on advances that neither species could have achieved alone. Their children had grown up knowing each other as neighbors, not enemies. All of this had come from one alien spy who had chosen love over war, one Drelvar agent who had decided that the small things mattered more than the big things, one Thomas Reed who had refused to send the report that would have started a catastrophe and had instead sent a report that had created a peace. The bookstore in Portland continued to operate after his death. His will had left it to a young woman who had worked for him for the last 10 years of his life. She had not known what he was. She had simply known him as a kind employer who had been like a grandfather to her. She kept the bookstore running. She kept his customers happy. She kept his memory alive in the small, quiet way that he had wanted. And in a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city, two graves sat next to each other. A human woman who had loved her best friend without knowing what he really was. An alien spy who had loved her in return and chosen her world over his own. They had been friends for 32 years. They had been honest with each other only at the very end. But the love had been real for the entire time. That was the real lesson of the alien spy who had lived among humans for 20 years. The lesson was that real things did not require the truth to be real. Friendship was real even when one party was lying about their identity. Love was real even when one party was a spy. Choice was real even when the choices were made under false pretenses. What mattered was what you chose. What mattered was what you did. What mattered was who you became. Agent Vrothan had become Thomas Reed. And Thomas Reed had been a good man. That was enough. That had always been enough. That would always be enough. Until the end of time.